Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss the announcement from the Conservative Party that they are going to be starting their general election campaign from this May. But it may take a while. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So yeah, the Conservatives are having a spring conference in Blackpool, and the party has announced a general election campaign to begin this May. Ooh, we're having a general election later this year then? No. Yeah, seems a bit silly starting a campaign this May for an election next year then. No, not that either. They seem to be saying that the election will be in 2024, which is the latest it can be. And they're going to have a 2-year campaign to get ready for it. To say this is unprecedented would be an understatement. That being said, one problem that even Conservatives MPs acknowledge is that Boris Johnson is always in campaign mode. He never switched from campaigning as the election was looming to governing once it was over. We never actually got the government part. So the rest of the party, I suppose, may as well swing behind him, I guess the thinking is. However, it is a frank admission that the Conservatives aren't really doing anything in government. It is understood that, in a parliamentary cycle, when you've won the election at the start, you've got a few years to actually get things done. The things that are going to take the longest to see the benefits of, you get that done first. Because by the time you are a year or so away from the election, you need to make sure you've got something to show for those policies. I know the Conservatives often get away with saying, oh, it's nearly there, don't worry, it's just around the corner, and the media back them up. But by and large, people want to see something. So you have to switch your focus to pointing out the benefits of the votes that the ruling party got at the last election. This is what you voted for, this is what we've given you. But this hasn't happened. What have the Conservatives actually put in place since 2019 that's helped anyone? Yeah, they can blame the pandemic, but actually the pandemic gave them an opportunity to power up their levelling up programme. Instead, the gap between the haves and the have-nots just widened. The widening accelerated. And it wasn't because of COVID, it was because of the government's COVID policies. Oliver Dowden, who was delivering the speech, he said that the campaign would be more like the one in 2015 between Cameron and Miliband than the one in 2019 between Johnson and Corbyn. Presumably, they have to because in Keir Starmer, they don't actually have someone against whom the public have strong views, whether fair or not. And they can't really incite strong views against him. Another thing Dowden said that caused me to have a bit of a double take, he said, I quote, "We are Conservatives. We exist to conserve." And I was thinking immediately, you're having your conference in spring, you usually have your conference in autumn. Start of autumn is the conference season. You had a conference last autumn. What was this about then? But also you can then think to yourself, okay, so if you exist to conserve, what was Brexit all about then? Didn't conserve our access to our most important market, did you? Didn't conserve our employment rights, as a load of ferry workers has just discovered. Didn't conserve our international standing, as our absence at high-level meetings about European security highlights. Haven't conserved our democratic institutions or the independence of the civil service. What are they doing? They're talking about completely wrecking the Electoral Commission, completely wrecking the BBC, completely wrecking our courts, changing constitutional changes that have occurred over the last few years has been quite something. Never seen the likes before since 1066. Or was this comment a frank admission that they'd been failing thus far in their primary function? But never mind the inconsistencies in the speech for now. There'll be time enough for that when they move from practising their lies in front of the party faithful to the wider population. The big question is, why are they running a 2-year campaign at all? There were a few thoughts that came to mind, but ultimately this will be to keep Boris Johnson in place. It's really that simple. Sickeningly, Johnson supporters are loving the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. They are pretending that they are taking a tough stance against Putin and his network, whilst actually helping Russian agents funnel their money to safety. It is grotesque. But it has also dialed down the interest in, say, Partygate, the exploding COVID infection rate, which we will soon have next to no information on. Even the rising cost of living has been largely elbowed from the front pages of the newspapers. Of course, people are still feeling the effects of these. Those people who had to be apart from dying loved ones are not going to forget Partygate. Those who still watch people die from COVID will not think the pandemic is over. Those who are choosing between eating and heating, if they can even do one of those, are not going to forget about the cost of living squeeze. But this isn't about fooling those affected, but fooling those who will somehow struggle on. You know, if it's talked about in the national media, people understand it's affecting a lot of people. But if it's not, they may be convinced into thinking, well, these problems exist. I mean, I'm experiencing them, but they're only small scale, so the government's probably doing a good job overall. That they don't actually see it as an obscene government failure to actually govern. But there will come a point where even this latest crisis in Europe subsides, at least in terms of public interest. The impact will obviously be felt for decades in Ukraine itself. However, it turns out, it will not be reflected in the media, in the British media, for the next 2 years. So there's going to come a time where normal politics resumes. Partygate will come back again. Now remember, how often has something been leaked at an inopportune moment from Johnson? Try and remember that we didn't find out about Partygate for a long time after it happened. Whoever leaked the information sat on it for a long time. Why? Well, if they'd announced it straight away, the Conservatives were getting a vaccine boost. They waited until Johnson was vulnerable. Remember when it came out? It came out after Johnson was starting to look very bad in the country as a result of the Owen Paterson corruption scandal. Then it hit. It'll happen again. Whoever is sitting on the damaging leaks is not going to bother leaking anything just yet because they know people are distracted. Once the time is right again, more will emerge. Remember, we know there are a lot of photographs and the police are probably not going to release them. Someone might. Might not even be Partygate, might be something else that we don't yet know about. Because we need to remember that with Boris Johnson, the scandals never end. It's not all about Partygate. You could list a string of scandals. There will always be more. He's not learned his lesson. He'll never stop thinking the rules don't apply to him because, in actual fact, they don't. So far in his life, he can take the view that the rules do not apply to him. Another thing to bear in mind is that although the Ukraine crisis is absolutely distracting people right now, the Conservatives are still behind in the polls. The Labour and the Lib Dems are actively working together to avoid splitting their vote in key target seats. The Tories will obviously try and counter this with more expensive and a dirtier campaign, as well as legislation to make the next election stack heavily in their favour, including boundary changes and stopping a load of people voting. But it's hard to see how that will be enough. The core problem for the Conservatives remains they cannot do without the red wall seats that they took in 2019. For all this talk of fighting the election in the manner of 2015, that is a fantasy. They have fundamentally pissed off too many swing voters to be able to take many of the seats that Cameron took back then. This is why they fear dropping Boris Johnson. If they actually thought they could appeal to more moderate Conservatives again, they could abandon the red wall, shore up support in the seats that they won in 2015, and then still retain power. And they could do it with a proper leader. But they can't. They don't believe they can do that. They've poisoned the well. They need the working class voters in the north of England to vote for posh boys who pretend to be one of them. And when it comes to the charisma and brazen lying skills needed to pull that off, they cannot turn to Sunak, Gove, Truss or Hunt. They're stuck with Johnson. Yes, this is a nonsense because Johnson has lost their trust. But trapped between a rock and a hard place, I think some reason that if enough time passes, maybe people will forget about his behaviour. The loathsome Jeremy Vine programme was even asking if people had forgiven Johnson yet. Why? Because Putin has invaded Ukraine? How does that make us forgive Johnson for what he's done? The other way of looking at it is that some Tory MPs may still be intending to get rid of Johnson, but 6 months out from the election. They'll keep him in place, maybe to see if he can turn it around, but they'll absolutely be thinking, yeah, we'll get rid of him. Now, if you tell these MPs that the election is not for 2 more years, then there's no urgency to sack Johnson just yet, is there? And Dowden also in his speech attacks the net zero policies that the government proudly announced when they hosted COP26 recently. That is a nod to the net zero group whom Johnson also needs on side. So basically this policy is designed with one purpose in mind: stop Tory MPs threatening Johnson's position. To the net zero crowd, he is signalling his willingness to drop the subject of climate change reforms. He's not specifically promising to drop the plans, but he is saying, well, we won't make a big deal of it. You know, that is designed to keep them on side should his leadership come under pressure again. To MPs who will risk a change if the polls remain as they are, he's telling them that the election's ages away, I've still got plenty of time, don't sweat it. He's also saying that the campaigning is his skill, and by going into a formal campaign now that lasts 2 years, he will turn things around with a long, focused campaign. He won't, of course, because the old scandals haven't gone away. They're just hibernating. And I can almost guarantee that right now he is behaving in a way that will become a new scandal before the next election as well. He's just shoring up support group by group to make sure there's no way Tory rebels can ever believe they have the majority needed to topple him. I don't even know if Johnson is all that bothered about winning the next election. I'm sure he wants to, but he doesn't think long term. He's just doing on a day-to-day basis whatever is required to make sure he's still the Prime Minister next week. And I'm now wondering if he might even get to lead his party into the next election. Can he actually paralyse his party into believe that nobody has a better chance of winning than he does? I'm not sure I mind that outcome either. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.